In the bustling capital city, life moved as usual. People chatted about awakenings and their amazing new powers. Meanwhile, John just wanted to go home and crash. A second-year student at Joonsang National University, he wasn't particularly excited about what was coming. Then came Parkwati, a rank A hunter and the loudspeaker of the day. He called for everyone in the 10th Awaken program, grouping them for their turn. John was in group 37, number 7. When his name was called, an assistant scanned his bracelet for verification, cleared him, and told him to leave his devices behind. The glowing portal loomed ahead, intimidating yet inevitable. John hesitated, nerves kicking in, but he took a deep breath and stepped forward. The moment he entered, the system announced his arrival, identification complete. It was his turn now. As soon as the identification process was complete, John collapsed onto the ground like a sack of potatoes. His head felt like it was auditioning for the lead role in Splitting Headaches, the musical. Groaning, he looked around and realized he was in some kind of bunker. Everyone else seemed fine, chatting, celebrating, but there he was, looking like a guy who'd just lost a fistfight with a vending machine. Next to him, a girl had apparently hit the jackpot with her ability because people from all the guilds were practically tripping over themselves to recruit her. Meanwhile, John got a pity pat on the shoulder from some guy who congratulated him on his awakening and asked how he felt. Like garbage, John muttered, and the guy nodded sympathetically. You'll feel better soon. Have you checked your abilities yet? John hadn't. But with all the subtlety of a cat poking a suspicious box, he pulled up his status window. His name was there. Cool. But then he saw his stats: strength, agility, vitality, dexterity, magic, all scraping the bottom of the barrel. At least the status window popped up by thought alone, which he decided was kind of neat. But his stats? Not so neat. Then he found his skill, a cloning summoning technique. He stared at it, head tilted, unsure whether to laugh, cry, or call tech support. Clones? What even were the rules? Could he just start making them now? Suddenly, the potential started to sink in, and he perked up a little. The guy next to him asked, "So, what's your skill?" "Cloning," John said, pulling a face like he'd just eaten questionable sushi. Better than having no skill at all," the guy said, patting him on the back like a proud dad. John glanced at everyone else showing off their insane abilities: fire, lightning, teleportation, you name it. Meanwhile, his clones felt meh. The pressure was mounting. Where's the exit? John thought miserably, but before he could sneak out, he was shuffled into the verification area. The staff confirmed his cloning technique with a confident 73% accuracy, like that was supposed to be reassuring. His shiny new registration certificate was issued, and he stared at the bracelet on his wrist. At least that part was over quicker than expected. As he pondered the possibilities of his cloning ability, he muttered to himself about his baby's working hard. Nearby, some high-tech computers buzzed and blinked, tied to games he used to play to escape reality. Sitting at one, he fiddled with a game for a bit, then threw himself onto a bed with a melodramatic sigh. Rent's due. School fees. Markets crashing. This game's dying, he mumbled into his pillow, spiraling. Then it hit him, why work himself to death when he had clones now? For the first time, he smiled. Guess it's time to let my other selves handle the grind, he said, cracking his knuckles. The future suddenly looked a whole lot lazier, and he liked it. Joonsang stared at his ID bracelet and mumbled, "All right, let's give this a shot." He stood up, looking like he was trying to charge himself like a human battery. Energy, mana or maybe just vibes, started swirling around him. His body twitched dramatically, and suddenly, bam! A blinding flash. An energy cloud formed, and poof! There he was, another John, fully equipped with arms, legs, and an uncanny resemblance. John blinked at his new twin and muttered, "Whoa, that's me." Excited but weirded out, he poked the clone. "You real?" he asked. "Yes, Master," it replied. "Master?" Oh, John was into this now. He threw some clothes at the clone because, frankly, the whole naked doppelganger thing was getting awkward. Then he realized something amazing: the clone could hear his thoughts. "Sit," he thought. The clone sat. "Stand," he thought. The clone stood. "Do it 1,000 times, he thought mischievously. The clone groaned but obeyed, proving it had his stamina, or lack thereof. Then his phone buzzed. It was Jeongil spamming him with questions about his new powers. "Bet it's something lazy, like sleeping all day," one message read. John rolled his eyes and ignored it, more interested in checking if the clone's workout had boosted his stats. Meanwhile, across the world in the Illuminati's shiny headquarters, George Lucas, no, not that one, was plotting. As the big boss with a blink ability and a city view from his skyscraper lair, he was obsessed with stats too. His secretary chirped, 80% of people awaken, and in 5 years, it'll be everyone. 5 years? That's forever, George muttered, staring dramatically out the window, probably planning something unnecessarily evil. Back in John's room, he was still marveling at his clone. Wait, does this mean I can literally outsource push-ups now? Does this strike the right balance? Meanwhile, John's clone was running itself into the ground, literally running past exhaustion. Even when it paused for a quick breather, it wouldn't stop for long. People offered it water, but nope, it just took off again like a robot programmed only to run. Naturally, this freaked out everyone watching. While his clone was busy being a track star, John decided to weigh himself. Despite eating enough to feed 2 people, he'd somehow lost weight. Guess my ability is tailor-made for me, he muttered, rubbing his stomach. John started noticing some quirks about his clones. For one, they didn't pass on pain or exhaustion to him. If they pushed too hard or got hurt, they simply vanished. They perfectly copied his appearance, adapting to any changes in his body. And best of all, he could command them with just a thought, even from far away. The downside? Clones couldn't make more clones. Thank goodness, or he'd be drowning in mini-Johns by now. Curious, John pulled up the Awaken wiki for some research. He realized his stats improved whenever his clone followed his commands. If he trained alongside it, his gains could double. Inspired, he grabbed a fitness magazine with Steel Body on the cover, reminding him of the games he used to play. His new plan? Supervise the clones while they did all the heavy lifting. Then reality hit. He opened his bank app and winced at his dwindling balance. Between his food bill and other expenses, he was broke. Guess it's time for a job, he sighed. After scrolling through job ads, he found a construction gig that looked promising. He called, and the employer sounded desperate. No interview, just come in. Like, right now. John planned to start the next day but got roped into showing up immediately. At least the pay would, hopefully, make it worth it. Zhang Sang-woo headed to the logistics center with his clone in tow, brainstorming how to explain why someone who looked exactly like him was tagging along. He gave the clone a crash course on what name to use and how to act. The building was massive, and Zhang had no idea where to go. Just then, an older man called out his name, taking a moment to recognize him since Zhang had shed a lot of weight. After a quick chat, the man showed him the way to the office and promised to catch up later. Zhang was nervous about the new job, but his clone? Cool as a cucumber. Zhang, on the other hand, just wanted to finish up and go home to eat ramen. The work was grueling, and while his clone seemed to lift heavy objects with ease, Zhang felt like he'd been run over by a truck. When the break was announced, Zhang collapsed while his clone kept chugging along like a machine. During the break, Mr. Diakchio appeared with soda and snacks, offering Zhang a friendly chat. He even spoke to the clone, who introduced himself as Kim Zhang. Back with Zhang, Mr. Diak asked how it felt being a university student doing hard labor. Zhang admitted it was exhausting but said he needed the money. If not for his bank balance, he would have bolted like other newbies. The conversation shifted to the university, and Mr. Diak shared his dream of his daughter getting in someday. Zhang encouraged him, saying he wasn't a great student either but still made it. This gave Mr. Diak hope, and he floated a surprising proposal. Would Zhang tutor his daughter? The offer, $51 per hour for 2 hours a session, sounded good, especially with his empty wallet. Zhang agreed, promising to teach all subjects. Mr. Diak, embarrassed by his poor studying skills, thanked him and promised to finalize details soon. Feeling a bit better after the break, Zhang decided the job wasn't so bad. He checked his status window and saw progress, which lifted his spirits. Ready for a snack, he reached for his bag, only to find it empty. His clone had eaten and drunk everything. Zhang's glare could have melted steel, but it was too late to do anything about it. The next morning, Zhang woke up exhausted. He decided to send his clone number 1, back to the part-time job while he stayed home to recover. He told it to return home after work, but when the clone reappeared, he realized it needed a shower and fresh clothes. After it cleaned up, Zhang performed a small experiment.
He was planning to continuously prick number 1's finger with a pin to receive the regeneration skill. Something he learned about from a shady website. He knew the clone will simply disappear if he overdid it and the test failed. But that didn't stop him from shaking nervously even at the simplest task of pricking the finger. The clone, that was receiving jabs, appeared to be a lot more calm and unmoved than Zhang himself.
But the act of poking it made Zhang tremble. Determined to get stronger, Zhang decided to continue the experiment for a month, even if it freaked him out. He allowed the clone to eat ramen when hungry and instructed it to work out afterward. Handing it his phone, he told it to answer any calls while he stepped out. Clone number 1 was officially on multitasking duty. Jong was hunting for a gym he'd spotted in a magazine when someone called his name. It was Kim Jong-do, an old friend who almost didn't recognize him because Jong had dropped a ton of weight from working out. Jong explained he was heading to the gym, and Kim, who was itching to train too, asked for the name. Jong mentioned it was called Resistant Body and nearby. Kim perked up when Jong added there was a stunning trainer there, deciding he'd tag along even if exercise wasn't his thing. When they arrived, the gym looked pretty standard: modern equipment, people sweating it out, and a receptionist munching on lunch. Embarrassed, the receptionist apologized and explained the grand opening promo. Jong jumped on the 3-month deal and asked for supervised training. After paying up, he hit the machines. The instructor praised his form but suggested he had more weight. Meanwhile, another guy in the gym was going full beast mode. His intense workout grabbed everyone's attention. The instructor, curious, asked if he'd been training for a while. The guy casually revealed he just started, thanks to his awakened powers. He even shared his status level, 2.1. Jong, overhearing this, couldn't help but wonder how crazy strong high-level hunters must be. It was no wonder everyone talked about hunters all the time. Jong was lost in thought when his phone buzzed. It was Jang Diakshel. After some small talk, Jang invited Jong over, saying he wanted to chat in person. Jong headed straight there, thinking about how Jang never joined the gym, probably because his workouts would make others jealous. Jong figured it was just a misunderstanding, and honestly, it saved him from sending a clone to pretend to work out. When Jong reached Jang's door, he heard a commotion inside. It sounded like Jang's daughter was upset about getting a tutor. Jang, clearly over it, told her to handle it herself and was just about to leave when he opened the door. Straight into Jong's face. Cue instant chaos. Jang's daughter saw the whole thing and looked mortified. They gave Jong a cold compress and a plate of fruit to make up for it. Both Jang and his wife were shocked by Jong's weight loss. After the apologies, Jong introduced himself to Haeun, the daughter, as her new tutor. She looked embarrassed but admitted she wanted to get into Janggak University. To start the lesson, Haeun had to show her grades, which were pretty average. Jong, sensing her awkwardness, shared his own struggles with aptitude tests back in the day. That eased the tension, and they got to work. After the session, Jong realized she was sharper than he expected. Over the next few days, they made good progress, and Haeun seemed to be trying her best. Meanwhile, Jong started pondering his own future. He found online listings for a familiar summoning ability and a telepathy scroll, but the sky-high prices made him scoff. "If I had that much money, I'd buy a house, not a skill," he muttered. Frustrated, he decided to nap. When he woke up, he felt determined to become a hunter. Hunting monsters sounded way better than manual labor. He grabbed his yellow coat and headed to the Hunter Association to gather information. The place was buzzing with hunters of all levels and hopefuls waiting to take the test. Jong felt a spark of excitement. It was time to see what he could do. The announcement came over the speakers: registration for the hunter license test would close in 20 minutes. Jong hurried to the basement, knocked on the hunter license room door, and opened it to find the place packed. His first thought? Why is everyone and their grandma here? His arrival drew some attention, but that was quickly interrupted by firm footsteps echoing through the room. Han Ma-young, a Class C hunter and the test inspector, made his dramatic entrance. He explained the test: 3 parts, written, practical, and aptitude, and a once-a-year chance to pass. Cheaters? Not tolerated. The pressure was real. Meanwhile, elsewhere, an employee of the JM agency was driving and grumbling into his earpiece, getting barked at by his impatient boss. Like Jong, he was broke and desperate for work. He was keeping an eye on the time, waiting for the hunter exam results. When they came out, the buzz was that the test was oddly easy: basic memorization, generous practice time, and an elementary school-level aptitude test. It felt like the government wanted people to pass. Jong wasn't complaining. At the exit, recruiters from various guilds were already swarming. A representative from JM agency congratulated Jong on passing and handed him a business card. Jong considered it while his status window popped up, revealing he could now summon 2 clones. Intrigued, he told the agent he'd think about it. Later, Jong created another clone, eager to see what number 2 could do. Meanwhile, the JM agent hustled, handing out cards and hoping for callbacks. He even visited the Haeseon Guild, Korea's top guild, But their shady contracts left him feeling uneasy. After some pointed remarks about his naivety, he left in frustration. Then, the agent got a call. Jong wanted to meet. At a cafe, Jong ordered an iced coffee, and got straight to the point. He wanted to hunt in a safe beginner area. When asked about his ability, Jong said, "Cloning." The agent, like everyone else, initially underestimated it but quickly changed his tune, calling it impressive. The agent recommended 2 hunting grounds, one safe for beginners and another with giant rats and better loot potential. Jong liked the sound of both and, after hearing about the item selling rates, decided to sign the contract. It was official, his hunting journey was about to begin. Since Jong liked both hunting spots, the agent asked him to choose one. But of course, Jong wasn't going to choose just one. Enter the real Yang Song-hoon, along with his trusty clone. It was the clone who signed the contract, and the whole situation was giving off weird vibes. To maximize his time, Jong decided he would hunt at both places. The agent was impressed. Having the real Yang Song-hoon join the conversation was definitely a game changer. Hearing that Jong wanted to hunt in both spots reminded the agent of a time when he'd met someone with a cloning ability, and it felt pretty remarkable back then. The agent asked to see a demo. Jong summoned a bunch of clones, all identical to the original. It was an impressive performance, and the agent was in awe. But then, the clones started getting ready for an attack, and that's when the agent freaked out. But when the clones attacked, nothing happened. They were just illusions. The agent's hand passed right through them like they were made of air. Still, the agent thought it would be a good ability for drawing monster attention. The agent realized that the cloning ability he was seeing now was completely different. After seeing Jong's clone up close, the agent realized this wasn't just a normal cloning ability. It was way more advanced. The agent even wondered if Jong was secretly a twin, which made Jong laugh. It made sense for the agent to think that, though, so Jong humored him. He even mentioned he had another clone at the gym, which totally shocked the agent. Who knew clones could build muscle? Jong explained that his clone got stronger the more he did, even boosting his stats with it. The agent now knew this wasn't a typical Class F hunter ability. However, there was still the issue of whether it would be a problem for the same person to enter multiple hunting areas at once. The agent thought it would be tricky since records were kept of each individual's entry. But Jong had a solution to that and promised to talk to the Hunters Association. The demo would have to wait until the next night, so they scheduled a meeting at the Hunters Center for 2 days later. The contract was already stamped, and everything was in motion. 2 days later, Jong arrived early at the building, eager to see the inside of the Hunters Center. Agent Genmo greeted him and told him to wait for his turn. When Jong finally got to the counter, he was asked if he wanted double access to the hunting field, which would let him use his clone more effectively. But to do that, he needed another bracelet for the clone. So, the agent took the request to the chief, and Jong waited for the paperwork. The amount of paperwork was overwhelming. But, being the helpful guy he was, Agent Genmo offered to handle it while Jong went to the demonstration room. Jong had done this before, but it was still a bit awkward to see his clone undressed in front of the woman running the test. After passing the test, a special bracelet would be made for the clone, giving it the freedom to enter and exit hunting areas just like the original. When everything was sorted out, the engineer showed real interest in the clone, but Jong took the clone with him, now equipped with the bracelet. It was a bit of a shame for the engineer, who probably had big plans for the clone, but Jong was feeling pretty pleased with himself. He proudly showed off the bracelet, announcing that the authentication was complete, and that was one more hurdle cleared. Finally, everything was ready for the big solo hunt. Agent Genmo asked if Jong was heading straight to the hunting field, which was exactly the plan since his schedule was wide open. But, there was one curious thing. Jong's clone was wearing a mask, which got a lot of people asking questions. Turns out, they were being watched by none other than Shin Hae-sung, the big shot master of the Hae-sung Guild. He wanted to know who the masked mystery was, and when he figured out it was Genmo, he shouted his name and made a dramatic entrance, jumping down from a high point like he was auditioning for an action movie.
Dramatic entrance.
The guy clearly knew Genmo and made a point of mentioning how surprised he was to see Genmo still in the hunting business. Jong, of course, recognized the man immediately. Genmo didn't seem thrilled to be in his presence, but he still had to show some respect because, well, hierarchy. The situation had the guildmaster laughing his head off. He had to stop and ask about the boy in the hoodie. The man took one look at him and figured out pretty quickly that he was a rank F. "What happened to you, Genmo?" He laughed. "You used to supervise C and D ranks, and now you're looking after a rank F kid in a hoodie?" Genmo looked like he might melt into the ground, but just as the mockery was reaching its peak, Zhang stepped up with a bright smile, like he wasn't feeling the awkwardness at all. "It's an honor to meet the master of the #1 guild in the country," he said. His words seemed to lighten the mood, and Shin Hai-sung even started to see the kid in a different light. Zhang then went full charm offensive, rattling off all the accomplishments of the guild master, mentioning that he monopolized dungeons and had total control over hunting grounds. He was pretty sure he had no idea what to do standing in front of such a notorious figure, but he was going to make sure he sounded like he did. Shin Hai-sung was impressed with the young hunter's courage and strength of character. He decided it was time to see if the kid's abilities were as good as his guts. At that moment, however, the guild master's assistant showed up, calling for him. The assistant made it clear they couldn't just stand there and do whatever they pleased anymore. Zhang, still with a grin on his face, said his goodbyes, but not before pulling a clever move. "You can find out my name for yourself," he said, leaving the guildmaster a little amused. The guildmaster nodded in approval, chuckling at how amusing the kid was, before waving off Agent Genmo and leaving. The assistant was not happy about all the freeloading around the association, but that was that. A little later, Genmo thanked him for his courtesy. He explained that he couldn't just stand by and watch the man make fun of Genmo. Genmo, looking a little embarrassed, mentioned that things had been awkward between him and the Hai-sung Guild ever since he'd been let go from there. Zhang had done a little research and found a rumor online claiming Genmo had been fired from the guild. That made sense now. No one wanted to work with Genmo because they feared retribution from the powerful Hai-sung Guild. Genmo was curious why Zhang wanted to join his agency if it was so risky, and Zhang's answer was simple: money. The payment rates were good, and besides, he knew he could count on Genmo if anything got too tough. This made Genmo take his responsibility a little more seriously. Meanwhile, #2, the clone, was training hard at the gym, pushing himself beyond the limits. The gym manager was on edge, watching this kid go all out, and other gym goers felt uncomfortable just bystanders to such intense effort. The clone, however, took it all in stride. But then, his phone buzzed. A message from the original: "Finish your training, shower, and wait in front of the gym at 4 o'clock. So, the clone took a quick hydration break and followed orders. The gym manager sighed in relief when he saw the clone finally slow down.
Meanwhile, John was busy bashing and collecting hot air bubbles at the slime fields. He noted how uncomfortable the work was since it demanded wearing a stuffy hazard suit that had an even less comfortable gas mask.
Only someone really tough could handle a workout like that. It wasn't that the slime fields were dangerous, but wearing the mask for too long made it a lot harder to work efficiently. Zhang knew he couldn't keep it up forever.
Janmo told him
He could keep hunting until the container was full. And once it was, he could just swap it out at the rented locker.
And the suit could help him last even longer.
The problem? He wasn't sure if he could last even 2 hours, let alone the 6 hours the job might take. But if it were #2, no problem, he could handle it. So,
John slammed his gear onto #2. And cheered the clone on, like an underpaid hype man who doubled up as a con artist. Then he and Janmo departed for the horned rabbit hunting grounds.
But when they got in the car, John realized #1 was missing. He had totally forgotten to pick him up at the gym, even though #1 was supposed to be waiting at the agreed spot. As they drove, John asked if he was going to keep calling the clones #1 and #2 forever. They're identical. John replied, if I give them names, it'll get confusing. The agent agreed, no names necessary, and asked if they were going to use weapons to hunt the horned rabbits. Yep, John confirmed. Do I need to bring my own equipment? The agent shook his head. Nah, you can rent stuff at the hunting field. But one day, You'll want your own. Suddenly, they arrived at Eugene's sandfield, which was heavily guarded with security officers all around. They were directing hunters left and right, and John mentioned how massive this place was, way bigger than the slime field. The agent explained that the place was famous for being the site of a past monster invasion. "Oh, yeah, I remember hearing about that," John thought. The portal there had been disconnected from the outside world, and most of the tough monsters had been defeated, leaving only the weaker F&D class monsters. They entered the hunting area, and it was buzzing with activity. "You can rent gear over there," John pointed to a shop. The vendor quoted a steep price, 700,001 for a rifle, night vision goggles, earplugs, 400 rounds of ammo, and a space rental. John nearly cried at the price. The agent explained that most of the cost was for the ammo, but it would be reimbursed based on how many rabbits they caught. One rabbit was worth the same as a bucket of slime. Looking at the map, the agent said they'd be hunting on the third floor of Building F. "I didn't know the place was divided into sections," John muttered. "We're here now," the agent said, pointing to their spot. Then, a loud noise startled John. The hunting field was full of people. Some were missing shots, others were getting their prey. Some had caught duns. John couldn't help but be amazed at how busy it was. John snapped out of it when the agent told him, "Your seat's number 4. He asked if John was confident in his shooting skills. "Who do you think I am?" John replied, "I only missed 3 shots during the hunter exam. The rabbits don't stand a chance." He set his gear, determined to make the most of it. They won't be able to escape the eagle eye of Eugene's sandfield. Aiming carefully, John spotted a rabbit. "I see one," he said, slowly squeezing the trigger. He felt bad for the poor thing. 3 hours later, John was miserable. Not a single rabbit had been hit. He couldn't understand it. His aim was fine, but every time he got close, the rabbit somehow hurt him and bolted. Frustrated, John called number 1 and asked him to hunt the horned rabbits instead. If he caught one, he was to text back one. And if he ran out of bullets, he was supposed to call. John sighed and decided to call it a day, heading home. Once back at home and lying down, John checked his system for any notifications about his mana. At least number 2 was hunting slime, and he could see that they were making progress.
His stats was slowly progressing. He reflected on the incident with Shin Hae-sung earlier and understood he still had a long way to go.
He closed his eyes and drifted off to sleep, hoping that at least number 1 would manage to catch a rabbit. But just as he started to snooze, his phone vibrated. Dozens of messages from number 1 lit up the screen. The next day, the scene shifts to the JM agency. The agent was calmly going about his day when his phone rang. He picked up the call, "JM agency," and on the other end, the voice asked, "Is this the agency that handles Hunter Jong?" The person introduced himself as the manager of the slime hunting field and urgently requested Mr. Junmo to come over. Confused, Mr. Junmo asked why. The manager explained that Jong had been hunting for over 24 hours without stopping. Mr. Junmo immediately said he'd head over as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Jong woke up peacefully at home and checked his phone. He was stunned by the sheer number of messages. How did this happen? He thought. He quickly skimmed through them in disbelief. At the slime hunting field, Mr. Junmo was surprised by the amount of slime Jong's clone had gathered. Tanks were filled to the brim. The clone had managed to fill all the storage containers in just one day. The soldiers around were in awe, unable to believe the feat. The clone was completely covered in slime. Mr. Junmo excitedly called Jong to report the good news. Jong answered, sounding distracted. Mr. Junmo said that the clone had been incredibly efficient, and it was time to stop. Jong responded, "Glad to hear that. Can you send the cleaners over to the horned rabbit hunting field? The monster carcasses are practically blocking the path." The people around were shocked by the size of the pile of dead rabbits. Some of them were even tempted to sneak a few carcasses away. Others were just amazed, wondering if Jong really hunted all of them by himself. As they admired the pile, a recruiter approached the clone and handed him a business card. "Are you in a guild?" the recruiter asked. The clone didn't even acknowledge him. Trying to stay calm, the recruiter thought, "It's normal, right? All talented people are a little weird." Another recruiter nearby whispered, "Don't bother. We've all tried. Even big guilds can't get through to him. While the recruiters were chatting, Zhang Yim quietly approached and handed more ammunition to the clone. After sending the clone back to hunt and leaving Mr. Junmo to handle the carcasses, Zhang praised the clone's work. The clone was thrilled and quickly reloaded his rifle before heading back to hunt more horned rabbits. People were starting to realize just how impressive the clone was. Even with only 50% of Zhang's power, the clone was a hunting machine, precise, focused, and never hesitating. Meanwhile, Heian, who was persistently asking what he was thinking about, Zhang, distracted, changed the subject and complimented her on how much she had improved. But she wasn't having it. "What's going on in that head of yours?" she pressed. Zhang shrugged it off and said, "Just thinking about how well the hunting field went." Heian's eyes lit up. "Wait, you're a hunter?" she exclaimed, shocked. "Well, yeah," Zhang replied. "I kind of forgot to mention it. I'm still a beginner though." This only piqued Heian's curiosity. "What about the hunter at the top of the rankings? You know, the god of eagle eye shooting from Yijangsan?" Zhang was clueless. "I don't know that one." Heian filled him in, explaining that this hunter was all over the Hunter's Wiki that day for taking down over 200 rabbits. The mystery surrounding the hunter, who didn't speak a word to anyone, made him incredibly popular. Watching a video about the mysterious hunter, Zhang was surprised by the nickname. Heian told him that her dream was to be a hunter, but she was scared to go to the hunting fields. She confessed that while she had the hunter's license, she wasn't brave enough to go hunting. Then, nervously, she asked, "If I do well on my test, will you take me hunting?" Zhang, confident as ever, replied, "Sure, no problem. Just pass the university test first, and I'll take you." "Really?" Heian asked, her excitement palpable. Zhang nodded and said, "I know some safe hunting fields." She looked at him earnestly. "Promise me?" she asked. Zhang sighed, but then made a pinky promise. No takebacks. As Zhang left Heian's room, he ran into her mother. She asked if the lesson went well, and Zhang confirmed it had. Curious, Heian pressed her ear to the door, eager to hear the conversation. As Zhang was about to leave, Heian's mother invited him to stay for a meal. "I have to go somewhere," Zhang replied. Behind the door, Heian smiled, feeling giddy. Once she was alone, Heian flopped onto her bed. "I have an appointment with Zhang," she thought, smiling to herself. "He's a hunter, and the conversation went so well. I wasn't sure about him at first since he's friends with my dad, but he's actually really nice. And handsome. Wait, where did that come from?" She blushed. "Anyway, I'm going to study hard and impress him." The scene begins with Zhang arriving at the horned rabbit hunting base, stepping into the elevator. As he ascends, he's wondering whether they've already collected the rabbit carcasses. Zhang Mo, surprised by his arrival, asks if he's there to check on things. Zhang responds casually that he's just been tutoring. Zhang Mo then mentions he had to supervise the collection process and asks where Zhang has been, to which Zhang says he's been busy. Zhang Mo informs him that there's been an unusually large number of hunters, 352 people, to be exact, checking the collection. Zhang asks if he's looked at the payment yet, and Zhang Mo replies, "No, not yet." Zhang, confused, pulls out his phone to check, only to find his balance at a staggering
32,720,301.
He's stunned, eyes wide in disbelief. "Is this really right?" he asks. Zhang Mo explains that since Zhang's hunting skills are top-notch, his payment was boosted to the level of a rank E hunter. Zhang, still baffled, thanks him but points out that he's not even rank E yet. Suddenly, a guy catches their attention. Everyone's eyes turn to him, curious about what he's up to. The man storms over to Zhang Mo and asks if he's the manager, pointing at Zhang. Zhang Mo confirms, and the man introduces himself as a hunter whose prey has been stolen. Apparently, all the horned rabbits he'd been targeting were snatched away, and now he demands compensation for his loss. Zhang Mo, sweating bullets, wonders what to do. Zhang, already planning something, says, "Don't worry, I've got an idea." Zhang Mo's curious, and the man, eager for compensation, demands to know what they're whispering about. He claims he's not being unreasonable, he just wants 10% of the total payment. Zhang can't help but laugh at this. The man, getting increasingly irritated, asks why Zhang's laughing. Zhang casually tells him to relax, saying the guy won't be back for a few days. The man, now furious, demands to know where they're going, but Zhang calmly replies they're heading to a nearby cafe. This sends the man into a rage, and he tries to punch Zhang. But before he can land the hit, Zhang orders Clone 1 to step in. Clone 1 jumps right in front of the punch, takes it head-on, and goes flying across the area, crashing into obstacles and slamming into a building pillar. Everyone watches in shock as the man stumbles back, insisting he didn't hit that hard. Zhang, filming the whole incident, calls the man evil. Turning to Zhang Mo, he asks, "Do you think people will let this kind of violent behavior slide in a sacred hunting ground?" Zhang Mo replies, "They definitely won't." The man tries to deny his actions, but everyone saw it. Zhang, shaking his head, says, "It's going to be a real disaster if that video gets uploaded to the Hunter web." He leans in, places a hand on the man's shoulder, and tells him to just go on his way. The man, still furious, grumbles and walks off, begrudgingly agreeing to leave. As life moves on, Zhang asks Zhang Mo if the man was from the Heisen Guild. Zhang Mo confirms, saying he suspected it too, since the man had been eyeing them from the start. Zhang, piecing things together, realizes this was an act of revenge. Zhang Mo explains that hunters from JM Agency are often targeted by guilds like Heisen, and it's no surprise their harassment continues. Zhang agrees, adding that he already knew the risks when teaming up with him, assuring Zhang Mo there's no need to worry about betrayal. Zhang then shares his plan to grow stronger, but Zhang Mo listens in, increasingly concerned about how dangerous it sounds. Zhang asks what he thinks of the plan, and Zhang Mo, taken aback, admits he's never thought of it that way. They agree to meet at the Monster Hunter Market at 2 p.m. The market, bustling with activity since the emergence of awakened hunters, has everything a hunter could need. Zhang, gearing up for his clone army, buys titanium armor that promises to withstand monster attacks, and a titanium dagger for close combat. After securing 2 more sets of armor, Zhang asks about acquiring abilities. Zhang Mo, not expecting to find any, still checks out a few stores for ability orbs. Zhang finds a good ability, but the price makes him wince. Embarrassed, he asks Zhang Mo for an advance. After a bit of hesitation, Zhang Mo agrees to lend him 50 million, saying they can handle the rest in installments. Zhang is grateful, but Zhang Mo reassures him not to worry, if everything goes according to plan, they'll make the money back in no time. And with that, the stage is set for whatever dangerous, crazy plan Zhang has up his sleeve. Back at home, Zhang was deep in thought, staring at the ability orb. He fiddled with it for a while, then skimmed through the instruction manual. To activate the ability inside, it said he could either infuse mana or press a button. Since Zhang wasn't exactly a mana expert, he decided to go with the button. He hesitated for a second, staring at the orb like it was about to explode, then slowly pressed the activator. A blinding light erupted from the orb, lighting up the entire room like a supernova. The light kept getting brighter until it seemed like the whole world was glowing. And just like that, the familiar ability was successfully unlocked. Zhang looked at his hands, still processing what had just happened. As the light faded, he noticed the orb had disappeared. He clenched his fists, eager to test out his new power. Without wasting a second, he summoned Clone 1 and Clone 2, who immediately appeared, still decked out in their shiny new armor. Zhang grinned and called them over to test the new ability together. Later, he met up with Mr. Junmo to share his plan for getting stronger faster. Zhang casually asked what Mr. Junmo thought of their hunting results. Mr. Junmo, looking pleased, said the results were excellent and far exceeded expectations. He was particularly impressed by the clone's exceptional dexterity, energy, and reaction, which had created results he never could have imagined. He even brought up the incident where Zhang had ordered Clone 1 to take a punch from another hunter. Clone 1 didn't just take the punch like a champ, it was so fast and efficient it could have probably knocked out the hunter. Mr. Junmo asked, confused, if that meant even with low stats, the clones had top-tier body control. Zhang nodded enthusiastically and said he was going to use that to his advantage. Mr. Junmo, a bit puzzled, asked how exactly Zhang planned to do that. Zhang grinned and laid out his master plan. He needed 2 places. 1. a training ground for close combat, and 2, a shooting range for long-range combat. He was going to send one clone to hand-to-hand combat classes and the other to a shooting range for skeet shooting. And of course, he wasn't just going to stop at the basics, he was going to push the clones to their absolute limits. No boring theory, just straight-up practice. In the combat classes, the instructor demonstrated how to disarm an opponent. Meanwhile, Clone 1 was off dueling the instructor with impressive speed. Over at the shooting range, Clone 2 was practicing trap shooting with a pistol, hitting every target with ease. Both clones were totally calm, cool, and collected as the instructors looked on in stunned silence. It was like they were born for this. Zhang couldn't help but smile at the results. He turned to Mr. Junmo and said, "I need that familiar ability." Mr. Junmo, still a little confused, asked why. "Isn't it just a skill to share vision with pets? What's the big deal?" Zhang shrugged and said, "No, it's about all senses. Everything will be connected. Imagine me using that skill while my clones are fighting or shooting." He paused dramatically. "You'll see what I mean." Zhang concentrated and activated the familiar skill. Immediately, the connection clicked in. Suddenly, Zhang could feel everything his clones were experiencing. With Clone 1, he could feel the heightened concentration during combat, the precise distance between him and the opponent, the angle of his joints, and the balance in his movements. He could even feel the flow of force as Clone 1 dodged and countered. Then, with Clone 2, he felt the steady breathing during the shot, the careful aim, the exact direction of vision, and the control over the weapon's recoil. Zhang could feel every little movement, every breath, every shift in weight, every muscle twitch, like it was happening to him. He opened his eyes slowly, overwhelmed. He had just experienced every sensation of his clones, and now, thanks to the familiar ability, he could access all their sensory data whenever he wanted. It was like getting a cheat code for life. He could see, feel, and know everything they could. The results were already starting to show. Zhang could even feel the air pressure as Clone 1 swung a baton, the smell of gunpowder as Clone 2 fired, and even the physical fatigue affecting him, even though he hadn't moved a muscle. All of it was happening through his clones, just by sharing their senses. Zhang couldn't help but grin at how powerful this new ability was. This was just the beginning. After experiencing everything his clones were doing, feeling their moves, their bodies, their every twitch, Zhang was now able to copy their actions instantly. He was like a clone imitation machine, but better. His stats had also gotten a boost, making him feel pretty good about his progress. With the results in front of him, he figured it was time to test both his fighting and shooting skills. He connected with Clone 1, focusing hard, and activated his new familiar skill. Immediately, he could see what Clone 1 was up to, fighting in some intense training session. The instructor, noticing Zhang's intense focus, could tell there was some strength behind it. The other students were baffled when the trainer suddenly decided to personally take on Clone 1. It was on. The instructor was ready to throw down, but Clone 1 was surprisingly quick with sharp movements and lots of determination. The instructor noticed something odd. While Clone 1's attacks were a bit lacking in experience, the defense was spot on. He could dodge almost every punch like a pro. Seeing this, the instructor started pushing harder, trying to use the clone's defense against it. But Clone 1 wasn't backing down. It was adapting, learning, and even started using the instructor's own strategy against him. It wasn't just defense anymore, Clone 1 was throwing punches too. The fight was on. The instructor, now feeling the pressure, tried to land a counterattack. But Clone 1 dodged and kept coming. The students watching couldn't believe it. Clone 1 was actually landing hits, and it was starting to get to the instructor. The trainer finally saw an opening and landed a devastating counterattack that knocked Clone 1 down. The students were in awe of the instructor's skill. Meanwhile, Zhang was experiencing everything in real time. He could feel the tension in the fight, the dodges, the hits, all of it. The instructor, grinning, asked Clone 1 if he wanted to continue. Zhang checked in with Clone 1 to see how he was holding up. Clone 1 wasn't backing down, he just gained momentum, mimicking the instructor's last jump with impressive style. The trainer was now a little surprised. Clone 1 didn't even flinch and asked for another round. Zhang couldn't help but be impressed by his clone's boldness. Once the fight wrapped up, Zhang switched over to Clone 2's experience. Clone 2 was at a shooting range, having a blast, literally. There was this guy next to him, acting all cocky because he thought he'd nailed his target. But Zhang quickly realized Clone 2 was, in fact, shooting at the clay targets of the guy next to him. Clone 2 wasn't showing off, though, he was just focused on the task at hand. Zhang tuned in, guiding Clone 2 to stay perfectly still, only rotating to follow the trajectory of the targets. He told him to remember every little detail, the aim, the target's movement, how to adjust with precision. Zhang was determined to milk this ability for all it was worth and improve his own skills through his clones, but after a while, constantly switching between clones became exhausting. Zhang realized his mana was drained, and he started feeling dizzy. Alright, time to take a break, he thought. His clones were working hard, so he needed to rest up for what was next. He also had an itch to test things himself and see how he stacked up. Just then,
Hey Eon.
Zhang popped up from afar and called out to him. It caught him off guard. He wasn't expecting her, and for a second, he even got worried about her being out so late at night. But she was just at the library, studying. Zhang was skeptical, but she insisted that she'd already finished her homework. Meanwhile, some rough-looking guys were talking about Zhang, clearly waiting for him. Someone was also keeping tabs on Kong Zhenmo, reporting on what was happening. It seemed like the guy was trying to intimidate, but things weren't going according to plan. Someone on the phone was in fact, they were downright annoyed. After a quick "we'll handle it" response, the call ended, and the angry guy threw his phone against the wall. He stomped on it for good measure, looking like he wanted to do something about the situation. The leader of this little group, looking unamused, asked what exactly had gone down to make the guy so angry. It had been a while since they last saw each other. Threw on a friendly face and casually asked why they hadn't done anything about it. He was curious why they were just sitting around letting things slide, especially after he had joined the #1 guild in the country. The guild didn't want him too close to the hunting field, so he figured he'd check in and see if there was still work for him. After some casual banter among the group, they agreed to find something for him to do. But before they could finish their conversation, something caught Zhang's eye across the street. It was him, the young man from the video. The man recognized him immediately, and the man seemed like he was coming over to settle things. Zhang wasn't sure if it was good or bad, but he was about to find out. The student beside Zhang asked who those people were, and before anyone could answer, a guy from the group started heading toward them. He was talking about his brother, and from the look of it, they weren't here to swap recipes. Zhang called out mentally to Clone 1 and Clone 2, "Time for some backup." Then, in his calmest voice, he asked the approaching group, "Can I help you guys with something?" The leader of the group was all chill, but one guy was visibly agitated. The guy, holding his phone like it was his lifeline, grumbled that he heard Zhang had a video showing his brother making a mistake. They wanted the video deleted, or they'd be unhappy. Zhang raised an eyebrow. "So, if I delete the video, everything will be fine, huh?" The guy smirked, clearly thinking Zhang was naive. "It won't be that easy. You're not fooling anyone, kid." But Zhang wasn't backing down. He pointed out that deleting the video didn't guarantee they'd leave him alone. The negotiator, more like the wannabe tough guy, noticed Zhang was sharper than expected and said, "You're not some amateur." Still, he wasn't worried. After all, Zhang hadn't deleted the video when he had the chance. "No big deal." Zhang told his student, "Run when you see the chance." But he wasn't expecting this whole situation to escalate so quickly. And just like that, it was on. Zhang was about to face a 2-on-1 fight, and it was going south fast. The first punch came flying at him, but he managed to dodge. However, they just kept coming, one after another. Zhang couldn't keep up, and before long, had taken a few hits and ended up on the ground. He was doing her best, but it wasn't looking great for them. Concerned, she tried to back off but was interrupted when something started brewing inside her. Zhang, noticing the energy building up in her, was surprised to realize she was using some kind of power. Though she was still a beginner and trembling like a leaf, this was definitely new. The two of the three guys chasing them were stunned, realizing she was awakened, but their leader wasn't impressed. "Don't get scared by a high school girl with powers," he scoffed. He turned to Miss Yan, asking if she was planning to show them something dangerous. She stood her ground, unshaken, and said if they got any closer, she'd unleash her full power. The leader wasn't impressed. "Go ahead, I dare you," he said, totally underestimating her. But when she attacked, they both panicked. Smoke filled the air, and for a second, it looked like she had done some serious damage. The leader wasn't worried though. "Awakened ones are a dime a dozen," he said, brushing it off like it was nothing. "You've got some guts," he muttered, clearly not expecting this much trouble from a high school girl. The fight wasn't over yet. The leader swung at Miss Heian again, but Zhang wasn't having any of it. He stepped in to protect her, landing a solid hit on the leader. This caught Miss Heian by surprise. Zhang wasn't messing around anymore, he was throwing punches that landed. He didn't just look like a guy who could take hits, he was the guy who made other people take them. One of the goons, enraged and yelling, charged at Zhang with a punch ready. Zhang thought about his training with Clone 1, remembering how to move. He dodged the punch, focused on his opponent's shoulder, and with a quick move, avoided the attack. But dodging wasn't enough. He learned that attacking wasn't just about swinging his arms, it was all about how you used your body. From legs to waist to arms, he landed a punch that sent his opponent flying. But as he landed that hit, another goon rushed in to get him. Zhang couldn't dodge this time, but he struck back, taking a hit while landing a solid punch in return. Even after taking the blow, Zhang stood tall. His opponent, on the other hand, was now out of the fight. It was clear who was still standing strong. Zhang was breathing hard, exhausted from the fight. Gunsuk smirked and commented, "Guess you know how to throw a punch." Then he added, "I'm almost hesitant to hit someone who looks like they don't even know what a punch is." Zhang, still sore from the last hit, wasn't backing down. He grumbled, "Yeah, I gotta punch in. But that guy's got some serious strength-enhancing powers. I can't afford to get hit by him again." Gunsuk, with a grin that could have been mistaken for a maniac's, charged at Zhang. Zhang barely dodged and managed to land a hit of his own, proving he wasn't just a punching bag. Gunsuk, not amused, cursed under his breath and ran toward Zhang with full intent to grab and hit him. Zhang, like a ninja in a school play, dodged the grab and landed a punch right on Gunsuk's face. Gunsuk tried to throw a punch back, but Zhang had already planned his counter and hit him again. "And that's game," Zhang called out. Just as he was about to take a breath of victory, he noticed something odd. Gunsuk was foaming at the mouth, and he was gearing up for a punch that looked like it could knock Zhang out of his shoes. "Great, now I really have to dodge," Zhang thought. But before he could move, someone grabbed his leg. Looking down, Zhang saw it was Gunsuk's friend, holding onto his leg like it was the last snack at a buffet. Uh-oh, this wasn't good. Gunsuk swung with everything he had, and Zhang lost his breath when the punch landed. The blow sent him flying backward, and he crashed into a pillar. Wheezing, Zhang tried to catch his breath. "Yeah, that was fun," Gunsuk taunted, but Zhang couldn't even lift his head to respond. Gunsuk was preparing another punch, but before he could follow through, smoke filled the air. The next thing Zhang knew, Gunsuk was being hit from behind. Zhang blinked, confused. What just happened? It was Miss Heian, who had used all her power to help him out. Gunsuk's friends started whining about the turn of events, but before they could do anything, Clone 1 and Clone 2 showed up like the cavalry and took care of the situation. Miss Heian didn't even know what just went down. She looked at the clones with wide eyes, wondering why they had such a weird look on their faces. Gunsuk, on the other hand, looked absolutely baffled. He called out to Zhang, who was just beginning to breathe again. "I can finally breathe." "Yeah, well, good for you," Zhang muttered, but before Gunsuk could charge again, Zhang leapt into the air, prepared to finish things off. He yelled, "Thanks for being my practice dummy, Gunsuk," and kicked him square in the face mid-flight. Zhang landed and collapsed on the ground to catch his breath, while Gunsuk lay sprawled out, missing a few teeth. His friends were also knocked out cold, making it a full knockout team. Zhang checked his system window, grinning at his victory, but then, boom, he fainted. His clones and Heian rushed to him as he went down. Later that night, Zhang was off walking with Heian. He asked, still groggy, "Why didn't you run when you had the chance?" He thought she'd want to talk about her powers, But instead, she said she couldn't believe the famous rookie hunter was actually a clone. John quickly shushed her. "Don't go spreading that around." He wasn't trying to be famous for being a clone. She was curious, though. "Don't you want to be famous?" she teased. "Not if it means having another fight like today," John responded. She agreed, sealing her lips. They arrived at her house, and John asked if she was okay and if she could hold a pen with her hand. She assured him it was fine because it was her left hand. "But I'm really hurt," she whined. "Can you go easy on the homework?" John raised an eyebrow. "Didn't you finish it already?" She sighed dramatically. "I swear, you only remember things when it's inconvenient for me." John smiled, thanking Hayon for saving him, which made her eyebrows shoot up. "What? You're actually thanking me?" "Yeah, if it weren't for you, I'd probably be out cold by now," he said, grinning. She puffed out her chest, clearly proud of herself. "I mean, it would have been better if you thanked me over some barbecue." John nodded. "I'll get you barbecue later, promise." "That's a promise." She waved as she headed inside, and John called after her, "I'll make sure you get plenty of meat." As John walked away, he noticed his clones quietly trailing behind him. He grinned. "You guys are clones, not shadows. Get to work." The clones sighed. "All the training fields are closed." "Boss." John bent down and picked up 2 sticks. "We'll practice at the park." 1 month after all this nonsense, Mr. Jummo called John. "How's everything going with your plans?" John answered, "Great. I can even hit a target with a pistol now, and my skills are improving." "Nice work, John. With Clone 3, you'll learn even faster." John checked his status window, smiling at the improvements. "You'll be shocked when you see this increase." Then, he asked, "By the way, any chance we can secure 3 Ranky hunting fields for tomorrow?" Mr. Jummo, taken aback by the request, said, "Sure, no problem. I'll get them. We'll make it happen, no matter what." John outlined the plan. "The clones will train in the morning, and we'll hunt in the afternoon." With that, he hung up, ready for the next day's chaos. John quickly set his clones to work, making them train everything from their upper and lower bodies to their cardio. He sent them to the park with orders to leave their weapons behind and come back in 12 hours, plenty of time to get fit and buff, he thought. While they were off exercising, John dove into researching how to hunt monster dogs. He figured if his clones could mimic anything, why not teach them to hunt properly? As he pored over monster hunting guides, he couldn't help but imagine how awesome it would be if his clones learned to hunt as easily as they learned everything else. The clones returned to his house after their grueling workout, practically falling over with exhaustion. John, who had been so engrossed in his research that he lost track of time, looked up and saw his clones stumbling through the door. "Wait, you're tired already?" he thought, not realizing how much they'd been through. He told them to go eat, assuming they were just full of energy and ready to go. John had watched tons of Rank F hunting guides and was pretty confident that his clones could take on anything after their training. As he was mulling over all the hunting strategies, he got a message from Mr. Genmo saying he'd be there in 10 minutes. Panicking a bit, John rushed the clones to eat faster and get ready for their hunting trip. The clones scrambled to prepare, and just as Mr. Genmo arrived, he couldn't help but remark on how intimidating the clones looked. "Are the hunting fields ready?" John asked. Mr. Genmo confirmed they were good to go, and the fields were nearby. John, eager to try out his hunting theories, told Mr. Genmo he'd stay behind and participate remotely using his familiar ability, all while working on mastering a new skill,
mana breathing.
After some intense practice and following a tutorial, John started to feel the Manager flowing through him, expanding and filling him with a newfound strength. Meanwhile, in one of the Rank F hunting fields, a hunter was crawling away from a monstrous mutant fish far too strong for the level of the dungeon. As the hunter tried to escape, he was overwhelmed and ultimately met a tragic end, his screams echoing through the dungeon. Back at the hunting field, Mr. Genmo arrived. He gave Clone 3 a cautious farewell, reminding him to be careful. Meanwhile, John was feeling pretty good about himself as he finally figured out the
mana breathing technique.
He followed the tutorial closely, focusing on his breathing and trying to stay calm. But then, in typical John fashion, he realized he'd messed it up. Turns out, mastering mana breathing was a lot harder than he thought. As the clones got settled into their hunting fields, John activated his familiar skill, connecting with Clone 1. To his surprise, he saw Clone 1 hunting monsters with impressive efficiency. Wow, this is working better than expected, John thought, feeling proud of his clones. Then, Clone 1 spotted a horde of giant rats, perfect for testing his newly learned hunting strategies. Remembering the tutorial on giant rats, John recalled that these monsters were super annoying and often required a team to deal with. But Clone 1, being a highly trained killing machine, pulled out his pistol and started picking them off one by one. According to the tutorial, the rats' skulls were too tough to hit, so the best target was the spine. Clone 1 made it look easy, taking down rat after rat with precision. But, as always, the rats came in hordes, and Clone 1 had to stay sharp. Giant rats are just experience points, the tutorial had said, and Clone 1 seemed to take that advice to heart, hunting with zero hesitation, no matter how many rats came charging at him. John watched in awe as his clone made short work of the horde, realizing that the clones didn't need to be scared or surprised. They were hunting like pros, focusing solely on the job and the thrill of the hunt. After all, when you're a clone, nothing really phases you. Now that John had tried hunting using his familiar skill, he realized his status window was always up to date, meaning his clones were probably getting stronger with each hunt. His goal for the day? To completely wipe out the field of rank F monsters. Meanwhile, other hunters who were entering the area stumbled upon a bunch of horned rabbits. They couldn't help but wonder how much they'd be worth if they managed to catch them all. Over with John's group of hunters, they suddenly had this weird feeling like they were forgetting something. It hit them like a ton of bricks. We never collected any of those horned rabbits we hunted. John, a little embarrassed, called back clones 1, 2, and 3 and told them to stop hunting and gather up all the rabbits they'd killed. He made sure to tell them to put everything in boxes, but he also had a sneaking suspicion that someone might have already taken the heads. As he pondered this, he realized that Clone 3, despite spotting the alien fish, hadn't bothered to catch it. "Why didn't you go for the fish?" John asked, to which Clone 3 casually replied, "I didn't hunt it." John raised an eyebrow. Wasn't it time to stop being so honest? This wasn't the moment for moral decisions. Still, he couldn't help but notice something weird. As he looked over at the alien fish, John realized that someone, or rather, something had already done the cutting. But who would do something like that? One of the clones was confused too, wondering if the fish was really an alien fish. It felt off, but still, it should have been taken. Then it hit him, the alien fish wasn't a fish at all. It was someone's upper limb. One of the clones started to feel something was wrong and got into position. And then, out of nowhere, the creature threw part of itself at them. It was like the fish was baiting them in. Before anyone could react, the clone got hit by the fish and, as luck would have it, had its right upper limb torn off in the process. John felt the exact same pain in his arm, which was still completely intact. He was utterly confused. What was happening? Why was he in so much pain? He crawled into a corner, clutching his arm as the intense pain flooded him. He quickly realized the connection between him and his clone had been severed, but there was no time to dwell on that now. He quickly contacted Mr. Genmo and asked him where clone number 3 was. At the sewage treatment plant in Incheon, the agent responded. Without missing a beat, John told him to get clones 1 and 2 there right away.
Please to channel my Sakrapara Sukrapa Sacrifice